I can't remember if I've used this example in previous episodes. I don't think so. And if I did, you know what? Using it again here is appropriate because I use it as an example in my conversation with my guest today. You know, when a candidate is being selected to lead an organization, there's this transition from being the applicant to being the named leader. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Candidate, particularly the end of the movie. If not, I highly recommend it. And it's because it's so good. At the end, the newly elected senator, played by Robert Redford, he seeks momentary refuge with his strategist. First in a service elevator and then in a hotel room. And he's just won this hard-fought election to be a U.S. senator. And in the few seconds of solitude, his face, like truly contemplative and obviously transformed, asks, "What do we do now?" And I remember his strategist is like, "What?" And he's like, "What do we do now?" Superintendents feel this way when they've been named the CEO of their school district. They feel this sense of jubilation to have been named. And then they also realize they now have a job to do. And everyone is counting on the district to succeed. And my guest today, he talks about coaching and mentoring. He describes the 3 C's: context, content, and conduct. And he talks about his firsthand experience with the power of language. Jeff Young is my guest. It's a great episode. Thanks for tuning in. Today on An Imperfect Leader, Dr. Jeff Young is my guest. Dr. Young has been the program director for Columbia University's Education Leadership Program at the Teachers College and co-director of the Urban Education Leaders Program and EDD program for aspiring district-level leaders. And he is transitioning back to his Red Sox roots, where he will be at Boston University, serving as director of the Pre-K-12 Education Leadership and Policy Studies program. And Dr. Young served as a superintendent of schools in Cambridge, Massachusetts from 2009 to 2016, following terms as superintendent in Newton, Lexington, and Lynnfield, Massachusetts. And as I alluded to just a moment ago, he's a Red Sox fan. And oh, brother, as a long-suffering Mets fan, this is going to be interesting. Dr. Young, welcome to An Imperfect Leader.
Thanks. Glad to be here, Peter. And sorry about the Mets. Although the Mets have that one big game over the Red Sox, so I'll never let that.
Yeah, I know. But the whole Bill Buckner thing. But I will show that today, because I'm going into Seattle a little bit later. This is the bag I'm bringing with me. And so for those who obviously can't see this because they're listening, bummed Mets fan. That's my bag.
That's a good one.
That was my Hanukkah gift last year. So there it is. So Jeff, I came across an article that you wrote titled "Personal Support in the Form of Executive Coaching Can Help a Superintendent Address the Enduring Challenges that Transcend Time and Place." And when I think about executive coaching for superintendents, I think, as you pointed out in your article, and I'll use your words if that's okay, you wrote, "The greatest surgeons, professional athletes, and business leaders embrace executive coaching as part of the normal course of events." Would you talk about this a bit? Why should school leaders seek coaching opportunities? And then how is executive coaching different from mentoring or consulting, those types of things?
So, as I noted there, we do know that other professionals do engage in coaching practice as a way to reflect, as a way to grow, as a way to learn, as a way to just expand their repertoire, and probably most of all to learn about themselves and kind of their part in the mess, if you will. And what I'm interested in working with, whether it's superintendents or principals or really any leaders, I happen to be writing about education and that's my field, but I don't think it's in any way limited to that. What interests me is in trying to delve into those areas of leadership that don't normally get addressed or don't normally get addressed in a kind of public setting. So that, all of us who have been superintendents, know the feeling of doing budgets and curriculum and, public engagement and, building projects and all the rest of that kind of thing, crisis management and so on. What I'm looking for here, this kind of work, though, is a little bit offbeat. So this is not about training people about how to do any of those things any better. There's hundreds or thousands of programs and professional development opportunities for people to acquire the knowledge base and skill set required to kind of dispatch the functions of the job. Here, what I'm trying to do is help people kind of understand through good questioning, really good questioning technique, to understand what's going on, what's really going on. The way the Columbia project that I participated in puts it is it sees coaching in 3 phases, and it's worth just mentioning these at the outset. The first being context, trying to understand with the client, let's say, what's up? That's the question there. What's up? What's going on here? What's the situation? How are you feeling about it? What are others saying to you about it? And so on. And then the second phase, and this is not a strictly linear process, right? It's more of just an iterative kind of process. The second phase is around content. And here the operative question is what matters, right? What kind of feedback have you gotten? What kinds of options are available to you to address the things that are of greatest concern? And how can we plan to help you do that? And that leads to the third kind of function here, which we call conduct. Right. So it's the 3 C's, and conduct is really the question about what next. Okay. So now you've kind of figured out your own place in it. You figured out what the situation is as best we can, what the feedback is, what the options are, how you want to plan. So now the question is, what are the action strategies? What are we going to do to actually, help move something along toward to either a resolution or a solution, depending on the nature of the problem. So that process is really about, as I say, a sort of a combination of self-knowledge, self-awareness, and where we are situated within whatever is going on, and at the same time, what's going on externally. So it's an internal, external thing. And I'll stop after just a second here and tell you that, as superintendents, most of us are used to speaking in public. This is what we do. Everything we do is in public. And so therefore, everybody's always parsing our words and trying to say, well, did he mean this? Is that a policy? Is it not? And so on and so forth, which is totally normal and fine. And we get used to that part of the job. What we don't really have time or space for is to step back from it all and reflect and think, okay, now what am I really trying to accomplish here? How do I have something to contribute to this situation? And, where can we go from here?
Yeah, and I imagine an important part of that question in the what matters, right, is to ask the question in terms of whose perspective is missing as I'm making these decisions or as I'm thinking about these things. Like, I'm going to make decisions with the people most impacted by that decision. And so asking someone or having a coach ask you, who's missing in this conversation as you're making these decisions or you're thinking about these things?
I mean, exactly right. There's always the sort of the common, almost cliche question is who's at the table? And in many ways, the more interesting question is who's missing from the table. And here, and particularly, as we know, and certainly in public education, it's often the marginalized communities who have been rendered voiceless by our society, or relatively voiceless.
Yeah, our systems are almost, created to exclude. And then we say, well, we sent an email out, so that they didn't come. That's on them. And
exactly. It's like you can check that box, right? You can say, okay, I have what is it, like an open door policy, right? Anyone can come and see me whenever they want. Fine.
Right.
Well,
but not after 5 p.m.
Yeah, right. The reality is, some people, have the time, the wherewithal, the internet connection, and whatever to write 5-page emails about every single thing I do. That's normal. That happens all the time. 5-page single-spaced emails about everything.
Yes, and usually at the end of that first paragraph, it says unacceptable, right? Whatever it was that I said, it was unacceptable.
Then we get at the end, we get the long list of all the credentials, the degrees, and all the rest of that kind of thing.
We were both superintendents in university town, so I get it.
Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about exactly. And so but then there are people who one don't have the language, 2 don't have the time, 3 don't have the internet connection, or otherwise the wherewithal. Let's put it in that general sense, or maybe even the knowledge that you're allowed to participate. Right?
Yeah.
And it's important to participate. Those people, those families who have been, kind of historically disadvantaged, they don't love their kids any less than the affluent families, right? But it's up to us to, pardon my language here, to kind of get off our butts and out of our office and to go see them rather than to wait for them to arrive and say, oh, here I am in my great space. Come and see me anytime you like.
Aren't you glad
they're
I'm
not
here?
going to show up because they're working 3 jobs.
Right.
And,
when is the right time to begin coaching? You've talked about this. I read about it, that you advise leaders, when you're looking to start this relationship, that there's a sort of a right time to do it.
Yeah. The more I think about that, Peter, to be honest, I don't know that there's a single right time. For some people, it's when you first start. Most people who are starting, particularly their first superintendency, there's a little bit of the imposter complex that normally accompanies that. Like, how did I really get this job? Don't they know that I'm fooling them? And,
I always associated with, although this is losing any kind of following because enough time has passed, but the Robert Redford movie, The Candidate, and at the end
yeah.
he's
Oh,
goes,
yes.
Now what? Like,
Now
what do we
what?
do now?
Exactly. So you get to be really good at going through the interview process and all the yada yada and get the job. The only problem is you then have to go ahead and do it. So, there's some value in that. And at the same time, I think there's equal value for people who've been at it for a while, and it never becomes routine. It's never cruise control in this kind of work. But we do think, and rightly so, we've acquired a certain amount of knowledge and skills, and we know how to kind of, get through the week and do the appointments and do what has to be done at board meetings or faculty meetings or parent meetings or what have you. We sort of know how to do that stuff. But that doesn't mean that we have somehow come to a place where we are challenging ourselves, are supporting ourselves, are really able to reflect on everything that we are doing.
As I have looked at some of the pieces you've written, one piece that really stood out to me was the least impressive time to approach coaching is when you're in crisis. First of all, you're not in a mental frame to really be reflective about practice because you're
Right.
in the storm. And at the same time, also, it doesn't suggest necessarily that's the best time to do it. I don't know the best way to say it other than to say, like, if we want to make more predictably successful decisions, it should be at a time where there's relative calm and we've got time to really think and plan for future, as opposed to everyone, I know we're in crisis right now. I'm going to go get some coaching. I'm going to go do some coaching right now.
No, I think that's exactly right. And, the thing about crisis is, often there is I may not personally know how to solve that crisis. There's a pandemic, there's a shooting, there's a fire, there's, whatever might happen, but somebody does. There's someone you can turn to solve the problem. This kind of goes, to that really important distinction between technical problems and adaptive challenges, right? So where technical thing that really makes the difference between those technical problems have a solution that somebody knows, right? The roof is leaking. I don't know how to fix a leaky roof, but I can pick up the phone and somebody knows how to fix a leaky roof. The adaptive challenges, which require changes in our behavior, changes in our values, changes in our way of seeing the world, changes in ourself, those are much murkier, to use the technical term. They're a mess. And so those kinds of challenges that tend to be more enduring in some ways, right, are the ones I think that really lend themselves to a coaching approach.
In the leadership model that I use to advise others, there's a dimension, the leader's learning work. And that's really the mind of an organization's work. And it really is. And inside that dimension is a term, serving as a lead learner.
Mm.
And in what I have read about you and what I've read by you, you speak to the human aspect of leadership. Specifically, you speak to the power of vulnerability. And serving as a lead learner is essentially saying that when you don't know something, you admit that you don't know it. And when you've made an error, you come forward and tell people where you went wrong, and you share a plan for making a mid-course correction. Yeah. And my question for you is, I guess more of a, would you speak to the idea of vulnerability as a valuable asset for someone in leadership? And how would you respond to a critic who says, oh no, vulnerability, that's a weakness. That's not a, yeah.
Well, that's often the way it's thought of, right? Vulnerability is a weakness, and therefore we should conceal it. So I think of vulnerability having less to do with the weakness and more to do with porousness, this sense of having our pores open to allow things in. It's like a kid in an 8th grade math class, right? If they're sitting there with their arms folded like this, right? That's not porous. That's not open. That's not vulnerable. And we shouldn't be doing that as adults. We should be lead learners because you know what? Welcome to the human race. I'm as imperfect as you as the next guy. And sometimes we can fall so in love with our own ideas and the nameplate that says superintendent that we can lose sight of that basic humanity. One story, it took me a while into my superintendent career before I could tell this story out loud. Even it's a true story, but I was too embarrassed to say it at first, and wasn't able to practice that vulnerability I'm describing right now. So, I would come home from work and my kids would say to me something, and this is true. They'd say, Dad, they put you in charge of $180 million. Don't they know what a dork you are? Right. And so finally, when I was able to say that out loud, right, to tell that story. One, it got a few laughs and all, which is very nice, but it showed that I'm just a guy. I happen to have this job, but I'm no better or worse than anybody else. I may have some degrees, but that doesn't mean that that I'm smarter than anyone else or more capable than anyone else. And so the willingness to kind of swim, in the waters of the human population, I think is really critical. And it keeps us in touch with the people that we, profess to be serving. But two, it helps those people see us as human beings and not as distant figures. So, it occurred to me one day, somewhere along the line, that anytime I entered a room, that most of the places I went to, most of the events or meetings that I would go to, those were being held because I was going to be there, right? The superintendent is coming. And so that was kind of odd to me. That struck me as odd that, that you get this kind of micro celebrity, which feels a little weird. But I realized somewhere that any room that I would enter, there'd be like a neon sign about 3 feet in front of me that said superintendent. And so it took me a while to understand that from the outside in, people saw me as superintendent. From the inside out, I felt like Jeff. And finding ways to reconcile those, that's another aspect that coaching can really help with.
I was recently giving a talk about employee resource groups, ERGs, and they asked, should the CEO be a sponsor of an ERG? I said, maybe. However, you want the CEO to be supportive, and they are certainly embedded in the organization to support the employee resource group. You also have to consider whether or not their presence at a celebration detracts away from what that employee resource group is standing for and trying to celebrate. For that very notion, everything changes once that person enters the room.
Exactly. Yeah. And as humble as we might feel on the inside, it's hard to see that from the outside.
Yeah, that's important. I think particularly since this podcast is about helping those who are new to the profession in terms of the superintendency, who have been doing it for a few years, but trying to navigate where they, have been making some missteps and things like that. I think that's a valuable lesson. One question I ask every guest, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts on this, and you've referred to yourself as imperfect, so I assume you have a thought. How does the term an imperfect leader resonate with you?
I think it describes everybody who's willing to be truthful with themselves. Anybody who stakes a claim as a perfect leader, I'm immediately skeptical or suspicious. I used to say to people, if you think you're the smartest person in the room, you have just automatically disqualified yourself from actually being the smartest person in the room. And so this is it, right? Imperfection, the way to live with imperfection, it's not something you cure, it's something you live with, right? Is by learning and by being open and vulnerable and porous and seeing that, I'm just going to try to do a little better today than I did yesterday. And, it's like when people would say to me, how can you stand it? How can you even do this job? How do you live with yourself? How do you sleep? And I say, the truth is, and this is again true, I never really lost sleep, during my superintendency. Why? Well, I'd come home at the end of the day and I'd look in the mirror and say, okay, well, I made 3 good decisions today, 3 bad decisions today. I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. I tried to act with integrity. Sometimes things worked out the way I wanted. Sometimes they didn't. But I could live with myself, right? And I think that's really it, is if you can live with yourself, then I think you can live with others in an authentic way.
And we'll be right back. In the many conversations I've been having with leaders all across the country, there are some themes that keep popping up. And one is the fact that children are really having a hard time engaging in school. And one big part of that is the phone that's in their hands. Schools around the world are seeing the damaging effects of phones on student engagement, social development, mental health. Yonder is a company that has developed a unique product and program to allow schools to become phone-free, from arrival to dismissal. Learn why 1 million students use Yonder every day. Minimize distractions. Maximize learning potential. Go to overyonder.com to learn more. We're back for segment 2 of An Imperfect Leader, called Imperfect Leadership in After Action. My guest is Dr. Jeff Young, former program director for the Teachers College's Education Leadership Program at Columbia University in New York, and he's now the director of the Pre-K Education Leadership and Policy Studies Program at Boston University. And in this segment, we ask our guests to deconstruct a decision that they've made, and then we discuss it. So let's begin. Jeff, what happened?
So when you first asked me this question, Peter, of course, there was like an avalanche of topics that I could talk about, but I decided to try to pick a little case study that's illustrative for me and resonates for me quite a long time after it occurred. So I was beginning a new superintendency in this is some years ago, in a high-performing district here near Boston, outside of Boston, the city of Boston. And I was young and eager to prove myself as someone who could handle a high-performing district and sort of go from good to great, right? That was like popular at the time, and I was reading all that stuff and so on and so forth. So I wrote to, I wrote it, I think, originally as a letter to the faculty to introduce myself. And then I exacerbated the mistake by publishing it in the local media. And the main thing that stayed with me about this, the terrible thing I did, and this is about language, was I said something to the effect of, now as your superintendent, I'm intending to catapult this district from, the place where it's had success to something even greater. So this little case is about one verb, catapult. Okay. And what I was trying to say, of course, is, yeah, we're all great and everyone's working hard, everyone's doing all these things, and we're gonna get even better, we're gonna meet the needs of all the kids, and so on and so forth. And instead, by saying catapult, one, I brought this kind of violent military imagery in, which I did not intend to do, but that was the effect of it, nevertheless. And I also brought in this sense that this was something I was going to do. This was a first person singular. This was not a first person plural.
Right. Aren't you glad I'm here? I've arrived, right?
That's it.
All these schmoes before me, but aren't you glad?
Finally, I'm here. I'm the savior, and I'm going to catapult. And you're all going to sit on this catapult, and I'm going to, shoot you off like some kind of arrow or missile into the future, and, hold on tight. So not at all. This was another time, by the way, where I learned the difference between intent and effect, right? So, I thought, okay, well, I'm intending to, show them that I love them and, and want to work with them. But the effect, of course, was quite to the contrary. And it was the thing that was amazing to me here, Peter, was I started my career in education as a high school English teacher. So you'd think I would know better. And yet I didn't. And so this one word began to formulate the narrative that people were constructing about me before they had actually met me. Right. Yeah. And it was my own doing.
So as part of this process, I always ask what happened. And you've shared, as a new superintendent or newish superintendent leading a district of who has seen great success in its past, you arrive and you, as an introductory letter, you send out to the staff and also publish in the local paper. So now everyone gets to hear. And in the model that I talked about earlier, the leaders learning work, the power of language is a one component, is one aspect of it. We try to make sure we don't say that teachers are the ones who are in the foxholes, right? Because they're not at war. They're not at war with anyone, although there's one metaphor that's often sort of regurgitated. So you use the term, I'm going to catapult you forward.
Yeah.
Okay. So it seems fairly obvious what was overlooked, although I imagine there may have been some things that you were thinking about. So what got overlooked in this process?
So aside from the poor choice of word, the poor choice of the word itself, the thing that I didn't realize, but I came to realize, is that there's really no such thing as a casual word from the superintendent. And this kind of goes to what I was talking about before, about the difference between the superintendent and Jeff, right? So people listen to everything that the superintendent says and make meaning of it. So even when this is not to say that you have to be, so tense and, never make a joke or anything like that. But it does mean that you just have to be really conscious. I had to be much more conscious than I ever was about what I was saying to the public, what I was signing my name to. And that sense of casualness, which is who I think I am, just as a person walking around the earth, I had to find the right fit between the superintendency and myself, particularly in terms of use of public speaking.
What did you learn about relationships, or what new relationships may have formed?
Well,
as a
what I
result?
learned is that even if they start badly, they can grow and improve. And this one certainly started badly, and it didn't take me too long to realize because somebody said to me, "What the hell are you talking about? We don't want to be catapulted." And I said, "Oh boy, right, okay, that was dumb." So after I did a little bit of reflection and apologizing and all the rest of that, I really felt it was incumbent upon me to show, to demonstrate, not just to say, but to live the kind of relationship that I knew I wanted to have with teachers and families and school boards and all the rest of them, the whole school community, really. And so the way that the first and probably most important way that I tried to do this was to build a good relationship with the president of our teachers union, who had certainly read this both as a staff member and as a citizen, right? He'd read it twice. He'd twice heard about the catapult. So, we
Real onslaught of catapults.
really, it's great, just great. Now, anytime you hear that word again, you're going to think
I
about
will
this.
always think of you. It's fantastic. I mean,
What a terrible association. But nevertheless, so it goes. And so,
catapults of love.
yeah, really. So that effort to construct, to sort of explain what happened, not to defend it, not to do anything other than to say that was really stupid of me, and then to build a relationship with the union. That relationship then began to trickle out to others, and I was able to be more of the person who I think I am on the inside, right? Which is a much more sort of collaborative, non-catapulting type. And although there are plenty of superintendents who are catapulting types, and in fact, in this district, I was succeeding somebody who was a catapulting type, which just, it was like salt
That
in the
only
wound.
exactly.
Oh, no, we
Yeah.
thought we got rid of that guy. Now we got another one who's, gonna, send us on, off into space. So learning that and learning the history and the context, right? Remember the first part of coaching was around context. So learning that, really coming to appreciate the context and the content, right? To stay with my coaching vocabulary here, the content, right, of what options did I have? The option I had decided on was to, take action and start with the teachers union. That's where I really wanted to kind of rebuild trust that I had never built in the first place. And, and that's where it kind of took off from there.
What frustrated you?
Well, beyond my own stupidity, was a sense that I was wasting my time, that I couldn't really get going in the district the way I wanted to. Some people talk about you want to come in and hit the ground running. I have a friend that I work with very closely, Barry Jens, who says, no, you don't want to hit the ground running. You want to hit the ground learning. And that's always stayed with me.
Yeah, he's really speaking to getting a beat on the system, right?
Yeah.
And you spoke just a moment ago about understanding its history. If you had known a little bit more about your predecessor and how that individual may have been interpreted, or the impression that person gave to those who were employed by the district, you might have chosen a different word.
I didn't do enough homework, right? And I wasn't thoughtful enough. I wasn't reflective enough. And again, I was young, so part of that is that. And but that's not a full explanation for it, so I didn't really do that. And I think I was probably so impressed with myself for having gotten the job in the first place, because it was one of those highly competitive searches, that I said, wow, I got this job. They think I'm really great. I can do just about anything now. And I was slapped down pretty quickly.
Well, it sounds like you made a pretty quick mid-course correction. And so I wonder, in the end, what was something that was good that came out of the situation?
The deeper relationships. And they extended not just to the president of the teachers union or to the teachers union, but to the teachers themselves and to the staff. And it just kind of, the whole episode sort of unlocked my inner self and allowed me the learning that came to me through this, dumb mistake. The learning that I took away from it gave me the ability to sort of unleash, if you will, the person who I am, and not feel afraid to show that as a sign of, you said it before, weakness, right?
Well,
That
that's what I was going to
real,
say is that,
real vulnerability.
being the observer now and listening to you tell this story in our earlier conversation about vulnerability, it almost seems like this was its genesis. It was like, look at the success one can have when they are vulnerable, genuinely vulnerable, not let me just sort of, show this sort of contrite, I'm sorry kind of thing, but truly and genuinely human.
So authenticity is at the heart of all this, right? If you don't really feel it, forget it, because anyone can see through it.
Right. You remember as a teacher when you'd say to a kid who's just driving you crazy, I care about you. I care about you. And they're like, no, you don't. Those are just words coming out of your mouth.
Exactly. And so people know that. I mean, know it. I know it. We all know it when someone is, just trying to bluff or sort of hedge in some way. We can see it. So one day I realized if I can see it in others, they can see it in me.
What advice would you give to an aspiring leader?
Take care of yourself. I always, even though I was never any good at it, I always talk about life balance. But again, I was never too good with it. But I would say the thing that's really hard, the thing that I always found the hardest about leadership was the loneliness of it, and the particular superintendency. So that in a district that there may be a bunch of principals, right? You have a peer group. There may be a bunch of central officer, assistant superintendents. There may be a peer group there, but there's only one superintendent. So there's no peer group on an ongoing basis to kind of say, oh my God, I don't know what the hell to do here, right? And so one thing that I started in Cambridge when I would hire new principals, each year I would build up like a little support group for them. We'd meet once a month, and it was just them and me. And I said, listen, if you're having trouble with the budget or the curriculum or how to report the test scores or any of that stuff, there are people here in this office who can help you. Go call them. That's not what this meeting about. This meeting, I hope I'm not going to ruin your podcast, is about your oh shit moments. This moment.
Oh, great. Now I got to put an E for expletive. You see, before you said the word but, and I went, oh, that's fine. I could use but. That's not
So
no, I won't take it out. Keep going.
These are the moments, right? So I said, we want to talk about the times when you don't know what to do. What do I do when I don't know what to do? And it's especially hard for leaders in education because, people, whether they're teachers or parents or kids or anybody, they think, oh man, you're the boss. You're making all the money. You've got the nice office. You've got the title. You must know what to do. And if you don't know what to do, there's something wrong with you. And maybe we hired the wrong person anyway. And so it's very hard to find, as I started off saying it, to find the space where you can talk to somebody honestly and say, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do, right? So we all have those moments. What do we do with them? Well, either we kind of try to bluff our way through and make it sound as if we know what to do, or maybe we, crawl up into the fetal position under our desk and hope that it all just goes away. But what I'm suggesting, particularly through coaching, is there are really positive and proactive ways to think through those moments and make use of them, right? Not to try to avoid them, because you can't, right? They're always going to be there. So what do you do when you don't know what to do?
My guest again was Dr. Jeff Young, most recently the program director for the Teachers College Education Leadership Program at Columbia University, and now the director of the Pre-K-12 Education Leadership and Policy Studies Program at Boston University. And Jeff, really, this has been such a treat. Having had the opportunity to meet you and talk with you gives me truly hope and optimism, which are two traits not often associated with New Yorkers and Bostonians, but I mean it.
Thank you.
I am so encouraged by the talk of human-centeredness and vulnerability as a superpower, and a real push and an emphasis and an encouragement for those who have walked in our shoes and are continuing to walk in those shoes as superintendents to access coaching. And I really do hope our paths cross again. Music for An Imperfect Leader was written and arranged by Ian Varley. Sam Falbo created the Daruma doll butterfly artwork. Imperfect leadership is not a scarlet letter. It is a badge of honor. It recognizes that serving as a lead learner is about being a vulnerable leader, an empathetic leader, a compassionate leader. And I'm proud to be an imperfect leader, so I hope you'll join me next time for another episode of An Imperfect Leader: Leadership in After Action.